Hi, I'm Siobhán Fletcher, one of the journalists up at Manx Radio, and welcome to the latest edition of our newscast. Now, the first annual review of the external validation process of schools and educational services in the Isle of Man has been published by the Department of Education, Sport and Culture. The document is the first of 3 publications which will be produced by external validators Etio. It's based on the inspections of 14 schools and 1 education service, which took place between January 2024 and October 2025. The report concludes with several emerging priorities by phase. It states that in the early years foundation stage, they need to improve approaches for fostering effective early learning. Between Key Stage 2, that's school years 3 to 6, and Key Stage 3, that's years 7 to 9, there needs to be a more unified approach to learning to ensure seamless learner development. In Key Stage 3, schools need to align the curriculum and assessments. And looking to high school, the report states improvements are needed in terms of attendance and behaviour. But it doesn't get specific about which schools require what improvement and where they've drawn these conclusions from. I sat down with Education Minister Daphne Caine to find out more. Can you introduce yourself for me?
Daphne Caine, MHK for Garth, Minister for Education, Sport and Culture.
Perfect. So we're looking at this annual review. I guess, first of all, can you just tell me what the report is and I suppose why it's been produced in the first place, just to catch people up?
Yeah. So on the Isle of Man, schools do a self-review every year. They're looking to make continuous improvements in the education that they deliver individually in the school, and we do as an island department, education authority, if you will, and across our education services, primary schools and secondary schools. While that goes on, once every 3 years on a rolling basis, we have now commissioned an outside service of external independent assessors who will come to each school or education service, and they will assess how the school is doing against the findings that the school has reported on against a framework. And they'll say whether they agree with the school's assessment, whether they are achieving in those areas, and where the areas for improvement will be. And then at the end of the first year, the first 12 months was October, the company Etio produces an annual overview, and that highlights to us and floats up themes and areas that can identify across the island basis the areas needing improvement, also the areas of excellence. But it's a very good roadmap for us to be able to identify what activity we need to undertake, where we need to focus our resources, and what areas we need to take the action to ensure that those areas improve.
And you mentioned that there's sort of strengths and areas for development there. So he talks about specialist provision centres and mainstream individualised teaching approaches. There's a whole list of different things. And then there's areas for improvement as well. So where does the department go from here? So I suppose for now, what happens next?
Well, we're very conscious that there are some fundamental areas of education that we need to put our priority focus on, and the department has determined that this is best place to give us that roadmap to how we look at improving in those areas is to harness the expertise we already have out in our education professionals, and that is to bring together a small number of volunteers from across the island into an educational leadership team, ELT. So it's to bring together across the island the professionals we have working in our schools and education service, a couple from the secondary schools, a few from the primary schools, and the educational leadership team will work on the actions and priorities that have been identified, because these cross all stages of education, from early years, how you learn better through play, to the transition from primary school into secondary school, how we continue to engage learners in their education, and importantly, how we address absence and how we keep them in the schools.
I suppose the one issue that in terms of like reading through the report, it kind of reads, I'm going to be really critical for you for a minute, I'm going to be honest, it reads like it's just full of buzzwords and it doesn't really tell us, how they came to those conclusions, or which schools need different things, or, there's a part where it talks about like there's this certain strength, but doesn't say why they were highlighted as strength. Is that intentional? Is this just to give an overview? Why is it laid out like that? Because it doesn't read as very informative.
This is quite hard-hitting from an educational perspective, because it says that across all key stages within our education system, there are areas where we can do better. And that is what we hope to address by having the educational leadership team come together and identify what action and resources and targeted support can be undertaken in those areas to deliver a better education service to all pupils. How the report is put together, it's not my report, it's an outside professional body that's very well respected, and they have surfaced these themes in order to say that not an individual school, but generally across the island, these are the areas that are coming up frequently to be a more general addressing, and action is needed. And that is including something like as fundamental as the curriculum, and whether the curriculum is right for the engaging the learners, and again that transition from primary to secondary, which I don't think is necessarily a huge surprise to the department or to educational professionals working across our schools, but I think it is very helpful in that it means we have a roadmap for where we need to focus the attention. The educational leadership team coming together is harnessing the knowledge and professional ability of some of our staff to come together for a year or two, but actually on a continuous improvement basis. We will always have the need for our individual schools to assess themselves. Then once every 3 years, that will be subject to external independent validation, which we've not had previously on the island. And it isn't meant, and it wouldn't be appropriate for those reports to be highlighting an individual leader or school or area of improvement. But the point about the annual review is that we know more fundamental changes that are needed across which stage of education.
I suppose, though, for the department and for parents out there who might read this report because they're interested in the way the kids are going to school, there's no sort of specific details of how schools are performing, or how, even all specific primary schools are performing, or, so, how's a parent meant to digest any of this information?
There's still about 15 primary schools and to go through the process, which is identified. This overview is about the first 14 schools and one education service that were part of that first tranche of visits, independent assessments. At the end of each visit, usually within 10 days, 10 working days, the independent public-facing parent information following that visit is published on each school's website. And each school has the feedback then to know how they need to grow and develop in the future years. So I think there's very much a sense that if your child goes to a school that has been through this independent process, the school website will have that school's report, and that in the same way will put in general terms what the findings are for that school. It is very different to Ofsted that the UK would have. We're not looking at a single word judgment. This is far more nuanced and much broader, that it assesses all parts of the school against a framework, and then the annual overview is simply that, an overview of the findings of the independent assessor that's been doing those assessments in our schools, quality assessments, saying generally these are the themes that are flowing out of those first tranche of schools and services that have been assessed.
I feel like I'm banging a drum, but I suppose, and you mentioned Ofsted there in that single word report, and I mean, I'm speaking to someone, my mum was a primary school teacher for 30 odd years, hated Ofsted, hated that summary in one word type thing. But I mean, the flip side of that is that parents kind of have this instant report on where their school's at and things like this. Parents, I suppose, would want more detail than is what is contained in this and maybe is put out to the public. How are they going to find that? I mean, because like you say, we're not assessed year by year by someone like Ofsted. We don't have league tables. So where are they finding that information to know where they're at or the child's school is at in our system?
They find that from the school, from the head, from the individual. The one thing I found in this, that when I've spoken to head teachers, overwhelmingly positive, very frank about how rigorous and difficult a process it is. It is, I suppose, it's quite stressful. It is completely, takes over your life for a couple of days or a week. It's looking at feedback from students and from governors, from parents, from the aspects that they're assessing against the framework. That report is then given to parents, and the greater detail that goes into the school to enable them to address any areas that need that extra focus, to enable them to go on this process of ongoing continuous assessment and improvement. The heads particularly that I've spoken to who have had that experience across where they have had Ofsted unanimously tell me this is vastly superior if we're focused on what we're wanting it to achieve, and that is to improve our education. And that's what it enables and empowers schools to do, because it validates their assessment of where they are and what they're doing. It can identify and help identify the areas that need greater improvement. The overview gives the department the roadmap to say there are some significant system issues that we need to address. By bringing together the educational leadership team, we put a number of people in post on an ongoing basis that can focus the attention on those areas by the educational professionals, who will be the ones to be able to find the solution to the issues that have been raised.
I suppose, I don't know if I'd describe it as a row, but there's been lots of FOIs on this topic. There's been written questions from Laurie Hooper trying to get those individualised school reports out. Will the department be releasing them at any point? Those
individual schools' reports, the public-facing information, which captures all the findings of the independent assessor following a visit to the individual school, that information is captured and put in language that cannot be misinterpreted. It explains the process, and then it gives the findings as an overview. What it doesn't do is say this school is excellent and this school has some challenges. It says generally there are positives and areas that need to be improved in everywhere they look, because that is what they're looking for. So the point about where the department comes in with the overview is where themes and areas that need greater attention from the department across our education system. This education leadership team that comes together, they can provide the roadmap to ensure that we go on the journey to prioritise those areas that need some attention, such as the curriculum, such as the absence rates, and again, that transition from primary to secondary, and come up with how we address that. In terms of the individual parent and the students at the school, they have the parent-facing information. The internal information is for the school to be able to address any areas outside of this fishbowl of the Isle of Man public and social media focus, because if we keep our eye on what we're actually hoping to achieve by this, we're wanting better educational outcomes. That isn't by hitting somebody over a big stick or pointing a big finger about a particular issue in a particular school. We're saying that the education system as a whole and individual schools have some positives and some challenges that need addressing, and this is how we address them to ensure that we get the best educational outcomes for all students, but also how we improve, how we continue to improve and strive for educational excellence across all our schools.
And you mentioned this education leadership team, which I'll clarify that that's the name of it, and the professionals that kind of be on that. So what's that sort of looking like? Is that head teachers? Who are you bringing together to do that?
This will be a group. As we've had from previous reports and Beeman's and other assessments of the department and the education service in the past, we brought together task and finish groups that worked on a temporary basis with volunteers and delivered a project. This is seen as more of an ongoing, continuous improvement, and there'll be a number of head teachers, senior leaders will put themselves forward probably for a year or two to come together and as the education leadership team, and they will report in to the department monthly initially to say how they are addressing the challenges that have been identified in the overview, and the department then will be able to assess what additional resources, if any, are required to address those particular issues, and where it's a more systemic thing, there'll be a longer term plan. This is not all going to be addressed for September. This is ongoing, continuous improvement of our whole system that hopefully will drive forward ever increasing improvement, but also better engagement across the schools for our students.
And sort of as that sort of stuff is implemented, where are we going to sort of see the report back on it? Is that going to be in the department plan each year? Is that going to be, are we going to see specific updates? You know, I know it's a long-term thing, but where are we going to see that?
Well, we'll see it with our monthly department meetings at a political level. The senior leadership team within the department will have the reports directly from the educational leadership team. So harnessing that knowledge, ability, professional experience and enthusiasm to address the issues that probably many people within the organisation have known. And I always think that the best people to fix it are the people that are there on the ground, that have the educational experience and willingness to help the Isle of Man do better and strive for that educational excellence. So things will take as long as they take. Some are perhaps societal changes, for instance, the absence rates, the how children learn. That's one of the areas, the themes that's come out. So how students learn and the challenge of the transition, they're pretty fundamental to ensuring we continue to engage with our students.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.